The sky was burning, not with fire but with light. Blinding, searing beams tore through the stratosphere of Kepler 62f, scorching the heavens in radiant arcs of plasma. The first wave of Thranx cruisers breached the upper atmosphere, slicing through cloud formations like celestial blades. The invasion had begun, not with a warning, not with diplomacy, but with an obliteration strike on the orbital defense. Rings. The Thranx didn't come to talk, they came to conquer. Captain Mira stood rigid on the command platform of the ESS Reckoner, humanity's last long-range dreadnought, still operational in this quadrant. A curved wall of reinforced hull plating surrounded the bridge like a war-scarred cathedral, the glow of tactical displays flickering across her face. Her jaw was set like carved granite, eyes locked on the live feed, one Thranx cruiser after, another emerging from slipspace tiers like leviathans from another dimension. Each vessel bristled with technology older than Earth's written history, and hatred far deeper. She spoke into the neural relay, her voice echoing across 3 layers of encrypted battle channels. Defensive net formation. Theta pattern. Interceptor wings hold the flank. Ground batteries prepare for staggered orbital fire. This is not a drill, this is extinction, knocking on the last door we've got left. The bridge crew, veterans of every human outpost from Vega to the Bleeding Belt, responded with practiced precision. Some had watched Earth vanish in an inferno of antimatter. Others had buried their children under glassed colonies. None of them flinched. They were what was left, what the Thranx hadn't been able to kill. Mira was humanity's blade, honed in the fires of Saul's death. She didn't ask for this war, but she would end it. Or she would burn with her species trying. Below, in the trenches outside Dawnspire, the last terraformed city still under human control, the battle had already erupted. Massive exotanks lumbered through the ruins, their particle cannons shrieking against the sky. Atmospheric fighters shrieked overhead, ducking through crumbling superstructures, leaving contrails of light in their wake. The ground shook as kinetic mortars hammered the alien drop zones. Flames danced where forests once grew, and still, the Thranx kept coming. Imagine your homeworld gone. Billions of voices silenced in a single galactic rotation. No parliaments, no broadcasts, no blue oceans, just a memory, and the hum of artificial oxygen in a metal coffin drifting through space. What do? You dig your heels in, you make your stand on the last inch of soil left beneath your feet. You fight like your ancestors scream in your blood, and never back down. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to XenoChronicles for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. Across the void, within the Thranx command vessel Ulthari, Admiral Krivok stood inside a nerve hive of bioluminescent tendrils and crystalline neural towers. His twin hearts pulsed in synchrony with the ship's living systems. His eyes, multifaceted and ancient, regarded the human defense net with something between fascination and disgust. They persist, he hissed in high Thraxil, a language of chittering resonance and telepathic flashes. A fractured species, armed with relics, still dares to challenge us. A lesser Thranx officer bowed its elongated thorax. Their resistance was not expected to last more than one phase cycle. Krivox's mandibles twitched. They are not rational. They are something else, something feral, and that makes them dangerous. Back on Kepler 62f, Commander Vice Danner's voice sliced through the encrypted comms of the Reckoner. Spectre Division has breached the atmospheric node array, deploying the malware payload now. If it takes, we blind their fleet for exactly 9 minutes. Kale clenched her fists. 9 minutes, not nearly enough time for victory, but enough time for a miracle. She turned to her tactical synth, Nara 9, a hybrid of synthetic intelligence and augmented human memory. Nara's sapphire oculars flashed as she calculated outcomes faster than thought. 9 minutes buys us one chance, Kyle said. Light up the sky. Nara 9's hands danced over the haptic interface, unlocking the Lazarus array, an experimental weapon so unstable the last test vaporized its own firing crew. Now it would be humanity's answer to extinction. 5 gravitationally linked projectiles, launched from the Reckoner's dorsal cannon, bending the very fabric of space-time as they arced toward the Thranx fleet. Each payload carried a singularity pulse capable of tearing a battleship in half. Krivox's eyes dilated. The virus had struck, blinding their tactical systems. Alien commanders screamed across failing channels, their war engines suddenly deaf and blind. And then, the Lazarus array hit. The explosion didn't look like fire. It looked like reality folding inward. One of the Thranx capital ships, the Maw of Grithkai, twisted upon itself and imploded, raining molten shards over the battlefield. The shockwave tore through the upper atmosphere like a hurricane of glass and metal. On the bridge of the Reckoner, silence followed. Then cheers. For the first time in this war, the impossible had been achieved. A Thranx warship had fallen in open battle. Not through sabotage, not through retreat, but face to face in the sky. Kyle's voice was quiet. Never underestimate a cornered species. But the moment didn't last. From the core of the Thranx fleet, a new vessel descended, sleek, black, shifting as if made of liquid shadows. Its form was not rigid, it morphed and flowed like a living nightmare. The ship was Zirvatu, the cradle of the iridescent legion. Warriors forged in dark matter, bred for one purpose: extermination. On the command deck of the Ulthari, Krivox leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with predatory certainty. "Release the Legion," he whispered. "Let them see why Defiance is a death sentence." And from the ship's obsidian belly, something terrible began to emerge. Creatures that did not walk, but hovered, that did not bleed, but glowed with inner fire. The iridescent Legion had entered the war. The sky above Kepler 62F darkened, not with clouds, but with the arrival of the iridescent Legion. The first of the elite warriors descended from the depths of the Zirvatu, their forms distorting and shifting in midair like shadows sculpted from pure malice. These were not soldiers, they were something else. Their armored exoskeletons shimmered with liquid light, as though their very bodies were made of starlight, woven into deadly precision. Captain Mira breath caught in her throat. The iridescent Legion was a myth, an ancient weapon the Thranx used only in their most desperate hours. And now in the heart of the Eastern Spiral, it was here descending like a reaper's harvest. "They're not human," Nara 9's synthesized voice reverberated with a warning through the comlink. "A squadron of iridescent legionnaires is worth more than 100 battle-hardened soldiers. Their armor is composed of nano-lattice composites that can withstand conventional weaponry. Their neural interfaces are designed for combat decision-making at speeds beyond human capacity." "Great," Kyle muttered, gripping the console tighter. "Just when we thought the odds were bad enough, on the ground, the human forces were fighting like never before." Dawnspire, once a symbol of humanity's triumph over the barren worlds of the outer colonies, was now a smoldering battlefield. The massive ruins, once home to 1,000 lives, now housed the last remnants of humanity's resistance. Towering exotanks fired volleys of concentrated antimatter bursts, illuminating the night like flares of dying hope. But for every human soldier that fell, 2 more took their place. The Thranx may have had numbers, but humanity had tenacity. Vice. Dana crouched behind a crumbled skyscraper, his eyes scanning the battlefield through the visor of his combat helmet. The Spectre Division, a special ops unit known for their guerrilla tactics, was holding the line, but just barely. His heart raced as he surveyed the advancing Thranx ground forces, spider-legged war machines that trundled over the burning ruins, deploying black-clad drones that filled the air with shrill cries. He had seen death before, but the iridescent Legion was something different. There was an unsettling beauty in their movements, a lethal grace that made every step they took feel like the closing of a tomb. They were no longer just enemies. They were an unstoppable force, designed to break the very will of a civilization. "We need air support now," Vice barked into his comlink. His voice was a mixture of urgency and resolve. "We're holding them off, but not for long." Back aboard the Reckoner, Kyle watched the incoming threat with cold precision. She was a leader who had learned the price of failure too many times. She turned to Nara 9 once again, the ever-present synthetic tactician who had become her closest ally. Activate the pulse rifles, full spectrum range. If they're as fast, as you say, we'll need 1,000 rounds per second. Nara 9's arms moved in a blur, her fingers sending commands through the tactical network. Pulse rifles engaged, auto-targeting active. Then, the ship's massive weapons array flared to life. Each pulse fired with such force that it cracked the very air, sending shockwaves through the nearby terrain. The skies above shimmered as the energy beams tore through the void, slicing into the Legionnaires. Yet, it wasn't enough. Their armor absorbed the blasts, rippling with otherworldly energy. These were not mere soldiers. They were engineered to be unkillable. On the ground, Vice and his Spectre team watched in horror as the Legionnaires landed with silent, terrifying precision. They didn't announce their presence with explosions or gunfire. They moved like shadows, their bodies twisting and flickering. With unnatural speed, suddenly the battlefield was alive with the flash of kinetic energy. A Legionnaire's spear, a blade of energy sheathed in quantum-infused metal, swept through a human soldier, slicing through his battle armor like paper. The man didn't even scream. He simply crumpled, a whisper of life extinguished in an instant. Another Legionnaire swept through a squad of exotank gunners, cutting them down with cold efficiency. Vice gritted his teeth, his fingers twitching at the edge of his weapon. The spectre of doom hung over him, and he knew deep down that they were on the edge of losing everything. "What are they?" a soldier next to Vice shouted in disbelief, watching in horror as a Legionnaire plucked one of their exotanks off the ground like a toy, tearing it in half with its bare hands. "They're monsters." "No," Vice said, his voice grim. "They're the Thranx's last card." Back aboard the Reckoner, Kyle could feel the heat of the battle rising. The Thranx were closing in. Their forces were vast, their technology advanced, and their morale unshakable. But there was something the Thranx didn't understand. They didn't understand humanity's resolve. Nara 9's synthetic voice hummed in Kale's ear. "Captain, incoming transmission. A Federation warship, ESS Vulcan, is entering the system." "About damn time," Kale muttered. She had been waiting for reinforcements, but the Vulcan was far behind schedule. It had been navigating through asteroid fields and pirate zones, unable to break free from the Thranx cordon. If they didn't make it in time, the war was lost. "Set the Vulcan on a decaying orbit. Target the Thranx command ship," Kale ordered, her voice sharp and unwavering. "If they're going to throw everything at us, we'll return the favor." Above them, the Vulcan's ion drives flared, plunging the warship into an evasive pattern, its cannons opening fire on the advancing Thranx vessels. The Thranx, distracted by the new threat, momentarily faltered. But it was too little, too late. A roar split the sky as one of the Legionnaires reached the Vulcan, but instead of a clean kill, it was met with a barrage of human ingenuity. The Vulcan unleashed its last trick, an EMP pulse, disrupting the Legionnaire's neural interface for a critical moment. But this small victory was a brief glimmer in the darkness. The Thranx were relentless. The iridescent Legion was still pushing forward, and each moment brought them closer to wiping out humanity's last resistance. The ground trembled beneath Kyle's boots as she stood on the bridge of the Reckoner, the ship's tremors synchronizing with the quake of battle that raged on the surface. The iridescent Legion was not retreating. They were advancing, step by silent step, with unerring purpose. Their relentless push through the human defenses was nothing short of surgical. They were designed to break spirits, to leave nothing but a hollow shell where a civilization once stood. And yet, despite it all, humanity was still fighting back. "I can't hold this forever," Vice's voice crackled through the comlink, the static and audible sign of the chaos surrounding him. "Spectres are down to 50% strength. We need that orbital strike, now." Kyle's knuckles whitened as she gripped the command chair. Her heart pounded with a rhythm that matched the chaos unfolding below. The Thranx, with their technological superiority and unfathomable numbers, had the battlefield in a vice. But there was one thing they didn't have. They didn't have the will to survive that humanity did. "Activate the Omega Protocol," Kyle said, her voice cutting through the tension. It was a last resort measure, a desperate gamble. If this failed, it would be humanity's final stand. Nara 9's glowing eyes flared as the protocol was initiated, and the ship's internal systems hummed to life. The Omega Protocol was a classified initiative designed to unleash the Reckoner's most devastating weapons in a single concentrated strike. It required precision, timing, and a high risk of total system overload. If the pulse didn't hit its mark, the Reckoner would be little more than a floating graveyard. Kyle turned to her first officer, Lieutenant Jackson. "Fire when ready. Make it count." On the surface, Vice and the remaining Spectres fought tooth and nail, each moment a battle for survival. The iridescent legion had become a walking nightmare. One of them, a towering warrior with a cloak of shifting prismatic light, suddenly emerged from the smoke. It moved like liquid, its form bending and twisting with every step. The pulse. Rifles' rounds hit its armor, only to ricochet with sparks. The Spectres were running out of options and the Legionnaire was getting closer. Vice didn't hesitate. "All units, fall back to the core," he barked. But as his team retreated, they were met with the chilling sound of a Legionnaire's spear, a lance of pure energy, humming through the air, striking down two of his soldiers in a single thrust. The rest of the team scattered, the sight of their comrades falling like dominoes fueling their drive to stay alive. "We can't outrun them," Vice shouted, his voice raw with desperation. He could feel the heat of the Legionnaire's weapon behind him, could hear its footfalls drawing nearer with each second. His fingers brushed the controls of his combat exosuit, trying to tap into its remaining power reserves. But he knew it was futile. They were running out of time. Back on the Reckoner, Kyle felt the weight of the decisions settle like a stone in her chest. This wasn't just about winning a battle. This was about holding on to the remnants of humanity, to the future of every colony in the Eastern Spiral, to everything that had been sacrificed to reach this moment. The Thranx may have had the galaxy at their feet, but they had underestimated one thing: the fury of a species that had nothing left to lose. "Now," Kyle commanded. The Reckoner unleashed its fury. A pulse of golden light exploded from the ships, barely streaking toward the Thranx fleet. It collided with a Thranx battleship, tearing through its outer defenses like paper. The ship shuddered, then broke apart, its once imposing form collapsing into a shattered heap of metal and fire. But Kyle didn't have time to relish the victory. The remaining Thranx ships were already regrouping. The Legion was still advancing and the human defenses were thinning. "You have to hold them back," Kyle shouted, her voice trembling as she spoke to the last remaining orbital batteries. "We're not done yet." But Vice's voice was the next to crack through the comlink, distant and strained. "Kyle, we've got a problem. The Iridescent Legion. They're not just soldiers. They're something more. They're evolving in real time. We can't fight them the same way anymore." Kale's pulse quickened. "Explain." "We don't know how, but they're adapting," Vice said, barely audible over the chaotic sounds of battle. "Their armor's changing, their movements. They're anticipating our every move. If we don't change tactics, we'll be completely wiped out." Kyle's mind raced. She had seen the Thranx evolve their tactics before, adapting to every challenge, each new obstacle. But this was different. The Iridescent Legion wasn't just adapting, they were becoming something beyond what they were programmed to be. Their very presence seemed to distort the battlefield around them. "We need to outsmart them," Kyle said, her voice suddenly calm with a new resolve. "We fight on our terms. We'll turn their own evolution against them." She turned to Nara 9. "Can we hack their neural interface?" "If we can interfere with their adaptive learning process." "It's possible," Nara 9 replied, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "But I'll need access to their central command node, which is embedded in their leader's neural core." "Then we'll make it happen," Kyle said, the weight of the decision not lost on her. "Prepare the strike team. We're going to take the fight to them." At the heart of the battlefield, Vice could feel the presence of the Iridescent Legion closing in. Their leader, the one that had decimated the Spectre team just moments before, was now within reach. The creature was different from the others. Its form shimmered with a darkness that seemed to absorb the very light around it. It was the culmination of their engineering, the apex of the Legion's power. Its glowing eyes met Vice's through the haze of battle, and for a moment it almost seemed to smile, a cold, calculating expression. Vice tightened his grip on his rifle. "This isn't over yet." The last of humanity's strength would be spent in this final charge. The battlefield was an unrelenting inferno of light, smoke, and despair. The ground beneath Vice's feet seemed to shake with every explosion, the firestorms igniting around him like hellish flames licking the sky. But through it all, one thing was clear. The human resistance wasn't finished. Not yet. Not as long as there was breath in their bodies. The iridescent legion was relentless. Their leader, the towering, nearly godlike figure at the center of the battlefield, loomed like a phantom. Its glowing eyes scanned the carnage with an almost eerie calm, taking in every movement, every twitch of the human soldiers below. It was no longer just a warrior. It was a predator, hunting with deadly precision, stalking its prey with a mind that could read every tactic, anticipate every move. Vice knew this wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a battle of wills. The Thranx may have had superior technology, but humanity had something they didn't: heart. They had the unyielding spirit of a people who had fought and bled for every inch of space they occupied. The Legionnaires might have evolved, adapted and surpassed every expectation, but they had not yet encountered the unpredictability of human defiance. "Squad, focus fire on the leader," Vice commanded, his voice harsh but resolute. His Spectre team had suffered casualties, but they were far from broken. Each soldier knew what was at stake. Every shot fired, every movement made, was a gamble against annihilation. They had one shot to change the course of the battle. The Spectres spread out, weaving between the jagged ruins of Dawnspire, their exosuits clanking as they moved with practiced stealth. Vice led the charge, his pulse rifle raised, targeting the Legionnaire leader with grim determination. But no matter how many shots they fired, the Legionnaire's form flickered, its movements outpacing their ability to track it. It was as though it existed in two places at once, its body a blend of shadows and light, becoming something far beyond human comprehension. "We can't hit it. It's too fast," one of the Spectres shouted, frustration lacing his voice. "We don't need to hit it directly, we need to disrupt it," Vice snapped back. He knew the key to taking down this apex predator wasn't brute force, it was strategy. If they couldn't match its speed, they would have to outthink it. Meanwhile, aboard the Reckoner, Kyle watched the battle unfold with a steady gaze. The Omega Protocol had weakened the Thranx fleet, but the tide of the ground war was still tipping in favor of the Iridescent Legion. The final gambit rested on the success of the strike team Vice had led into the heart of the battlefield. They had to reach the Legionnaire leader and breach its neural interface. The Reckoner's sensors were locked on the target, feeding data to Nara 9, who was preparing to hack into the Legionnaire's central command system. "We have one chance." "At this," Kale said, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. "If we don't disrupt that Legionnaire's neural core, the Iridescent Legion will become unstoppable. Do it now, Nara." "Transmitting signal," Nara 9 responded, her fingers dancing over the controls. "However, Captain, there is a complication. The Legionnaires have developed an adaptive firewall. It's evolving in real time." "Damn it," Kyle muttered. She had known the Thranx were capable of incredible technological feats, but this was beyond anything she had expected. "We need to break through, find a way to destabilize the firewall." Nara 9's eyes flickered as she calculated their next move. "I'll need access to the Legionnaire's neural link. I'm feeding a signal through the Reckoner's command relay. It will force an overload in their system if successful." "Then do it," Kyle said, locking her gaze on the holographic map of the battlefield. "Vice has to reach the leader. We'll give him the opening he needs." On the ground, Vice and his team were getting closer to their target. The iridescent Legionnaire leader had paused, its glowing eyes narrowing as it observed them, calculating. In that brief moment, Vice saw it, the shift in the air, the subtle flicker of a shadow, a change in the battlefield's rhythm. The leader was preparing to adapt to their strategy, to outmaneuver them. It was now or never. "Now!" Vice shouted. The Spectres opened fire again, this time targeting not the Legionnaire's armor, but the ground beneath it. Their shots exploded against the ruined terrain, sending shards of metal and stone flying. The dust created a blinding cloud, momentarily obscuring their target. Vice's heart raced as he pushed forward, his mind laser-focused on the task ahead. He could feel the pulse of the battle, the rhythm of chaos. Every second brought them closer to either victory or obliteration. As the smoke cleared, Vice's team surged forward, weapons raised. The Legionnaire leader was still standing, but now it was flickering. The constant shifting of its form had slowed. It was beginning to lose the perfect synchronicity it had once held. "Hit it now, hit it hard," Vice roared, his finger slamming the trigger of his pulse rifle. The concentrated energy beams crashed against the Legionnaire's form, breaking through the adaptive defenses that had once made it invincible. The leader staggered, its movements becoming erratic. For the first time, the Legionnaire faltered. That's when it happened. Nara 9's voice came through the comlink, sharp and clear. "Captain, I've breached the firewall. The Legionnaire's neural core is destabilizing." Kyle's heart skipped a beat. The plan was working. The world seemed to move in slow motion. Vice and his team were closing in, every step echoing like a drumbeat of fate. The Legionnaire leader, now vulnerable, lashed out with one final desperate strike, but it was too slow. Vice's rifle fired once more, the energy beam slamming into the creature's exposed neural link. The Legionnaire shrieked, a sound like metal scraping against metal, as its body collapsed in on itself. The battlefield was silent for a heartbeat, and then the skies exploded. The Thranx forces, already shaken by the loss of their commander, faltered. The Legionnaires, their adaptive technology thrown into chaos, began to fall into disarray. The human forces, seeing the sudden shift in momentum, surged forward with renewed hope. The Vulcan's cannons roared from above, sweeping through the remnants of the Thranx fleet. The ground forces, emboldened by the fall of the Legion leader, pressed the advantage. But even as the tide began to turn, Kale knew the victory was incomplete. The Thranx were not done yet. The war was far from over. The skies above Dawnspire had been painted with the fiery hues of battle, but now, as the last echoes of combat faded into a heavy, uncertain silence, the true cost of victory began to sink in. Humanity had survived the onslaught, but only just. The Reckoner floated above the planet like a beacon of defiance, its hull scarred, its systems crippled, but still functional. The Thranx were retreating, broken, disorganized, but not yet defeated. Vice and his Spectre team stood amidst the charred ruins of the battlefield, their faces streaked with grime, sweat, and the dark streaks of blood that had become a grim badge of their survival. The ground was littered with the wreckage of fallen Thranx war machines, their adaptive armor now lifeless, twisted remnants of once unbeatable technology. Human soldiers, though battered, stood tall, an unspoken bond of triumph and loss shared among them. They had not only survived, they had proven something. Humanity would never back down. But for Vice, the victory felt hollow. As the dust settled, his eyes searched the horizon, his mind replaying the moment the iridescent Legion's leader had fallen. The beast, once a near-perfect weapon of war, had crumpled before their tenacity, their ingenuity. And yet, in the back of his mind, a question lingered. Had they truly won, or had they merely delayed the inevitable? Kale's voice crackled over the comlink, cutting through his thoughts. "Vice, report." He exhaled sharply, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. "We've secured the area. The Legion is retreating, but not without causing severe damage. We've taken casualties, but we're holding the line." "Good," Kyle said. There was a pause before she spoke again, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "We'll need to regroup. The Thranx will come again. They've tasted defeat and they won't forget it." Vice nodded, though he knew Kale couldn't see him. "We'll be ready." But the truth was, Vice wasn't sure how much more they could endure. The Thranx were not just an enemy. They were a force of nature, a collective intelligence that had spread across the stars, consuming everything in its path. And though they had won today, the galaxy's future was still hanging by a thread. As the wounded were loaded into the evac transports and the survivors prepared for the next stage of their battle, Vice's mind drifted back to the Legionnaire leader. The moment it had fallen, something had changed. The entire battlefield had shifted, as if the war itself had been recalibrated. The adaptive technology of the Thranx, so perfectly designed to counter any threat, had faltered. That one defeat, a single victory, had shattered their near-impervious defense. But Vice couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The iridescent legion had learned from the failure, and the Thranx were nothing if not persistent. They would evolve again. They would adapt. It wasn't over. On the Reckoner, Kyle stared out at the planet below, the weight of her responsibility pulling at her like gravity itself. She had led humanity to this point, but the path ahead was uncertain. The war was far from won. The Reckoner had dealt a blow to the Thranx, yes, but Kyle knew all too well that the galaxy's most dangerous enemy didn't retreat for long. They had only just begun to unravel the depth of what lay ahead. "Captain?" Nara 9's voice broke the silence, her tone colder than usual. "There's something you need to see." Kyle turned, her eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Nara 9 pulled up a series of rapidly evolving holographic data streams. "This is an encrypted signal originating from the heart of Thranx space. It's a warning." Kale stepped forward, her brow furrowing. "A warning from who?" "A signal from their central command. It's not a message to the Reckoner. It's a message to humanity." The hologram shifted, revealing an image of a massive, glowing structure. It was unlike anything Kale had ever seen. Towering spires of unknown metal stretched far into the atmosphere, encasing a city that hummed with unnatural energy. In the center of the image, a figure stood, an alien unlike any Thranx they had encountered. "What is that?" Kyle whispered, the chill of uncertainty creeping up her spine. Nara 9 paused for a moment, analyzing the data. "It's not just a figure, Captain. It's a Thranx, a new type of hybrid. The evolution we've been seeing is no accident. This is something more, something they've been working toward for centuries." The image of the hybrid flickered and then froze, its eyes locking onto Kale through the holographic projection. Her cold, calculated intelligence radiated from it, a being that could think beyond the collective, beyond the hive mind. "It's their next move," Nara 9 concluded. "And it's not just about the war anymore. They're preparing for something bigger." Kyle's heart raced as the realization settled in. The Thranx weren't just preparing to conquer. They were preparing to transform, to evolve into something humanity had never imagined. And this time there would be no easy victories. The fight for the galaxy's future was only beginning, and humanity was about to face its most dangerous challenge yet. "You're telling me," Kyle said, her voice a mixture of defiance and dread, "that the war is far from over?" "It's just beginning," Nara 9 replied. Outside the Reckoner, the stars glimmered with the promise of an uncertain future. The battle for Dawnspire had been won, but the war for the galaxy was far from decided. The Thranx had evolved. Humanity had barely held on. The final question lingered in the air like a shadow. Would humanity ever back down? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this intense battle for the future of humanity, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. What do you think will happen next? Let us know your thoughts and stay tuned for more epic battles in the XenoChronicles.